She made a man eat his daughter after what he did to her son. 32-year-old Marta Perez Leon lived with her 3-year-old son in Mexico, and it was only them two. She was a single mother, and that was her only son. Tragically, her son's life was ended when a drunk driver hit him, and he didn't survive. The man ended up getting arrested for the crime, but authorities let him go because according to the law, they didn't have enough evidence to convict him of reckless homicide. Once Marta found out about this, she was not happy at all, and this is when she decided she was going to take matters into her own hands. So she would follow this man everywhere he went, and one day she saw that he was leaving a bar very drunk, so she decided she was going to seduce him, and she tricked him to going back to her place. Once they made it back to her home, she somehow convinced him to let her tie him up before being intimate. This man had no idea that Marta had kidnapped his little girl, ended her life, and cut her into little pieces. This poor little girl was not to blame for what had happened, but somehow Marta believed that this was the best way to get her revenge. During the time that the man was tied up, Marta began feeding him pieces of his daughter, and he had no idea. About 12 days after feeding him, Marta confessed where the meat had came from, and the man started to panic. He vomited and just asked for his life to be ended already. A few days later, Marta ended up ending his life, and then she went to the police to confess about her crime. Police ended up going to Marta's house to investigate the crime scene, and when they walked in, they were met with a horrific scene. The deceased man was tied up, laying face down, and in the other room was a skeleton of the little girl. Marta was arrested and will spend the rest of her life in prison, but to her it was worth it because she got revenge for her son.
This is an actual nightmare. So it starts when this woman walks into the bedroom of her apartment and she feels liquid dripping on her head. She looks up and sees that her smoke detector is leaking. It's in her hair, it's all over her clothes, and at first she just thinks the batteries inside the smoke detector may have exploded and now are leaking out battery acid, but it started to smell awful. After putting a pot underneath the smoke detector, it began filling the pot with this liquid in a span of 15 minutes. Because of the awful smell, she thought it may be leaking sewer water from the apartment upstairs. So she goes upstairs and knocks on their door and asks if everything is all right. And the man that answers the door tells her that everyone in the apartment is fine. So she goes to the apartment managers and tells them that she thinks sewer water is coming from her ceiling. After this, she starts walking back to her unit, but when she gets to the bottom of the stairs, she notices the man who answered the apartment door standing there on the phone with someone, and she hears him say, "Steve is dead," and he clarifies that he's been gone for quite some time. Steve is her elderly neighbor that lives in the unit right above her. And that's when it dawns on her. The liquid coming out of the ceiling is the bodily fluid of her neighbor Steve leaking through the floor.
The delusional stalker fan that murdered his celebrity crush because if he couldn't have her, then nobody could. Robert Barda was the youngest of 7 kids. Growing up, his family moved around a lot, and there were accusations of neglect and abuse. His older brothers would actually force Robert to drink his own pee as like a sick form of entertainment for them. School life was no better for Robert. He had no friends, and he was bullied a lot. To escape his life, Robert, as a child, developed a very intense and lifelong obsession with watching TV. He would turn on his favorite shows and he'd watch these great families and these cool friend groups, and he would pretend that it was his life. This is when his delusions and psychosis really started, and he truly started believing that the people in these TV shows were speaking to him directly. Robert first became obsessed with a 10-year-old girl that he saw on TV named Samantha Smith. He truly believed that they were friends even though they never met, so he would send her fan mail, and one time he actually got a letter back, and this only fed his delusions. Samantha and her family lived in Maine, which is 3,000 miles away from where Robert and his family lived in Arizona, and one day Robert actually stole over $100 from his parents and bought a bus ticket to travel across the entire country to go meet Samantha, and obviously she had no clue that this was happening. Luckily, Robert was reported missing, found, and brought back to Arizona before he could make contact with Samantha. So he starts calling her home dozens of times a day, and remember, he's a kid. He's a preteen at this time. Robert's obsession with Samantha ended when she tragically died in a plane crash in 1985. This sent Robert into a really deep depression. He ended up dropping out of school, but now he just had even more times to stay home and watch TV. And he quickly found a new obsession. And that was a teenage girl named Rebecca Schaefer who was starring in a new sitcom called My Sister Sam. Rebecca had a very different upbringing than Robert. She was the only child born to very loving and supportive parents, and she had a very happy childhood. She was incredibly smart, obviously very beautiful, and at only 16 years old, she was scouted by one of the top modeling agencies in the country. She ended up moving to New York City, pursuing modeling and acting, and very quickly, she ended up getting the lead role in a new primetime sitcom. Rebecca moved to Hollywood to star in My Sister Sam, which was a brand new sitcom about two sisters. And Rebecca was playing the younger sister, Patty. And Patty's character was like the really cute, funny, silly, really charming younger sister. It's like the girl next door character. And Robert became instantly very obsessed with this character and Rebecca. He actually had a hard time distinguishing Rebecca and her character Patty from each other. He thought that they were just like one and the same. He started collecting everything that had Rebecca's name on it. He would tape every single episode of My Sister Sam and just watch it over and over and over again. He also began sending her a lot of fan mail. Meanwhile, Rebecca's career is absolutely taking off. She's getting invited to a lot of premieres. She's doing interviews. She's on the red carpet. She even helped host the Thanksgiving Macy's Day Parade. And she was on the cover of 17 magazine, which was like her big goal when she was just pursuing modeling. She was getting so much fan mail, but she didn't have the time to respond to every single letter coming in. So Rebecca actually hired a team to send out responses. It'd be like a photo of her, signed her name, and it would have like, thank you for being like the best fan. And it was that random company that was replying to Robert's letters pretending to be Rebecca. It's not even Rebecca that's responding to Robert, but he is obsessed and delusional, so he sees these letters as like an actual relationship that he has with Rebecca. And then the summer of 1987, Robert bought a bus ticket from Arizona to Hollywood to go meet Rebecca. He didn't know her address, so he just showed up at the studio where they filmed My Sister Sam, and he told the security that he was there to see Rebecca Schaefer, and he had this like 5-foot teddy bear and flowers to give her, and he told the security that Rebecca knew him and she wanted to see him. Security turned him away, and then he started calling the studio like dozens, hundreds of times, and returned back to the studio with a knife demanding to see Rebecca. But he did not get his way, and he went back to Arizona. Back in Arizona, he tried to forget about Rebecca. It was actually easy at this time because My Sister Sam got canceled during its second season, so now he was at least not seeing Rebecca on his TV every single day anymore. But then Rebecca booked a role in a new movie that was coming out, and her character was less young and innocent than the character she played in the sitcom My Sister Sam. This character was more like edgy, wore dark colors, wore heavy makeup, and had a relationship with another male actor. This infuriated Robert. He thought that Rebecca was cheating on him and that Hollywood changed her. He doesn't understand that he doesn't actually know Rebecca, and these characters that she plays aren't actually her. So now he's sending her a bunch of letters again, but this time it's hate mail. It's angry. And at one point he actually says that if he can't have her, then nobody could. And then one day in 1989, Robert is reading an article in People magazine about a celebrity that was murdered by a crazy, obsessed stalker fan. And he learns in this article that the stalker got her address by hiring a private investigator. So Robert hires his own PI, and he gets Rebecca's address. He also has his brother buy him a weapon. And on July 17th, 1989, Robert gets on another bus to LA. Rebecca was living in an apartment in LA. At the time, her neighbor was Brad Pitt, who at the time was best known for being in Pringles commercials. And July 18th was a really big day for Rebecca. She had a potentially life-changing audition later that same day. She was going to be auditioning for a role in The Godfather 3. Rebecca's getting ready for her audition when she hears a knock on the door. It's Robert, and he's now face to face with the girl that he's been obsessed with for years. And Rebecca has no clue who he is. She's nice because she was a sweet girl, but she told him that he had to go and then she closed the door in his face. Not only did this make Robert really angry, but he was confused because in his mind, Rebecca knew who he was. They had a relationship. She was cheating on him. Robert ends up calling his sister and he tells her, "You're going to hear things about me soon." He then hung up the phone and went back to Rebecca's apartment. She was still getting ready when she heard a knock on the door. She went and answered it and it was Robert again, but this time he pulled a weapon out, he pointed it at her and he pulled the trigger. The entire time Rebecca was just asking him why. Why? She had no idea who this guy was, and he was obsessed with her enough that he took her life. She tragically died. She was only 21 years old. This made huge news right away. People in Hollywood, people all around the entire world were absolutely devastated. She was such a sweet, young, talented girl with a very bright life ahead of her. Robert's sister saw the news coverage and she knew that Robert was obsessed with this girl and also remembers that phone call that they just got off of, and she realized right away that, oh my God, my brother did this. My brother killed her. So she called the police. Robert was arrested and he was actually found running back and forth on a busy LA highway. I don't know if he was trying to hurt himself or what he was doing. At his trial, he tried to plead not guilty by reason of insanity, but it was very clear that this was very much a premeditated murder. So he was found guilty of first-degree murder and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Rebecca's death had a lasting impact on a lot of people, but also had an impact on society and our laws. Hollywood changed the way that they handled stalker fans, and following Rebecca's death, America put in forth their first anti-stalking law. This is such a tragic and terrifying case, how your life could be stolen by someone that you don't even know, but they're so obsessed with you to the point that they feel like they have to kill you and you have no idea who this person even is.
They went on a long surfing trip in Mexico expecting to have the time of their lives, but instead they were all ambushed in the middle of the night and shot execution style in the head. Their bodies would later be found in a remote 50-foot deep well, with a fourth body that had been down there for much longer. So how did this all happen and why? This is the disturbing murders of Jake and Callum Robinson and their friend, Jack Carter Rode. And if there's ever a story that you need to hear in regards to traveling and staying safe, it's theirs. So let's talk about it. This is Jake and Callum Robinson. They were 30 and 33-year-old brothers from Australia who loved to surf. This was their friend, 30-year-old Jack Carter Rode. Jack lived in the US, as did Callum, who moved to Ocean Beach, California to play professional lacrosse. Jake still lived in Australia, but in April of 2024, he flew to California to meet up with his brother and friend Jack. Together, they all planned to go on this exciting surfing and camping trip in Mexico, and they were especially excited to go to Punta San Jose, which is about 20 miles south of Ensenada. So they packed up their white Chevy Colorado with all of their boards and personal belongings and set out for the trip. Punta San Jose is an extremely remote area, but the campsite the men chose was a beautiful surfing hotspot. Like, it really couldn't get any better than this, and they were all looking forward to having the time of their lives. But on April 27th, 2024, this would all be cut short. That night, as the surfers settled in for the night, they met this woman. Her name is Ari Giselle Silva, and she is 23 years old. Ari befriended the group and really made them trust her. At first glance, the men really didn't have anything to worry about. They had safety measures set in place and they weren't new to traveling. They were also all sleeping at the same campsite, so surely nothing could go wrong, right? Well, unbeknownst to the men, Ari was setting them up. After talking with the tourists, she noticed all of their nice belongings, like their phones and surfboards, and of course, their truck. The truck itself was really nice, but Ari was really focused on their tires. So after she said her goodbyes and parted ways, Ari left, and this would be the last time the three men were ever seen alive again. The next morning came and went, and when the men didn't check into their Airbnb in Rosarita Beach, the brothers' family started to worry. It wasn't like them to just ghost a reservation like that, but they tried not to worry too much because this was a really remote area. So they initially thought that they just got caught up somewhere with no cell phone service. But hours would go by and it was radio silence from all three of them. Unable to ignore their concerns any longer, the brothers' family took to social media to see if anyone anyone locally had seen the trio, and when no one had, they were reported missing to the police. This sparked a massive search which included several different agencies, including local police, the Mexican Marines, and even the FBI. It didn't take long though for the men's campsite to be found, but this discovery really only caused more panic and worry. Their campsite was literally burned to a crisp, so it was clear right away that something horrible happened to these men. But nothing could have prepared anyone for what the police found next, because about 4 miles away, sitting on a desolate ranch, was the men's white pickup truck. This was found on May 3rd, so 5 days after they were reported missing. It was completely abandoned on this ranch in the Santo Tomas area. It was completely gutted and all of the wheels were missing, and this site was about an hour inland from their campsite. After searching near where the truck was found, authorities stumbled across a remote well about 4 miles away. This well was covered up and was about 50 feet deep, and when they looked inside, they found all 3 of the men's decomposing bodies at the bottom. But what's super crazy is that there was also a 4th body in the well too, and authorities later found that this was the owner of the ranch where all of this was discovered. I guess the body was of a local farmer who had recently lost his ranch, aka the crime scene, to a cartel, which is so sad because it was obvious that he had been down there for quite some time. An autopsy concluded that the Robinson brothers and their friend Jack had all been shot execution style in the head, and then their bodies were dumped down the well that was hidden in a cliff. So now that they found the men's bodies, the biggest question was who would do this to these random tourists and why? And it didn't take long for investigators to track down Ari, the woman who befriended the men, and then came her confession. Ari admitted to scouting out the guys, and when she saw that they all had really nice things and a really nice truck with nice tires, she went and told her boyfriend and his 2 friends. She urged them to go and rob the men, so they did. Sometime between the hours of 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. on April 28, 2024, these 3 men ambushed Jake, Callum, and Jack as they slept and attempted to rob them. It's suspected that the men tried to fight back, which resulted in them all being shot execution style in the head. These men then stole all of their personal belongings and truck before dumping their bodies and burning the campsite. Ari confessed that her boyfriend came back to her house that night and said that he did something to those 3 white guys. And when she asked what he meant, he said, quote, "I killed them." End quote. So with all of this information, the 3 other men, as well as Ari, were all arrested. The other men are Jesus Garcia Cota, his brother Ireneo Garcia Montano, and Angel Leon Aguilera. Ari was found to be the ringleader and instigator, so to speak, and she was found guilty of violent robbery. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison and ordered to pay the victims' families $3,000. The other 3 men rejected a plea deal that would have given each of them about 52 years in prison, but they chose to not take any accountability for the murders. Now they're all going to separate trials for aggravated homicide, and they're looking at over 200 years in prison if found guilty. This is such a devastating story to me because in one instant, 3 really good men were all taken from this world far too early, and all over some tires. Callum was described as super lovable with a larger-than-life personality. He was an extremely talented athlete, and he had played for Australia in the World Lacrosse Championship. He loved to teach young players and was overall just a really good human being. Jake was pursuing a career in medicine and loved running, surfing, and going to live music festivals. He was described as happy, gentle, and just a really compassionate soul, as was their friend Jack. None of them deserved what happened to them. Their family set up a foundation in their honor called the Callum and Jake Robinson Foundation. It's to celebrate all 3 men and to keep their memories alive through doing good deeds. It's the fact that she did everything right after a fun night out with friends. She went out partying, got a safe ride back to her friend's house where she planned to stay the night, and then fell asleep on the couch. She wasn't alone, her friend was right down the hall, so you'd feel safe, right? Well, someone still broke into the home via the back door, kidnapped her from her friend's couch, and brutally SA'd and killed her. The only sign that something was wrong was when her friend woke up the next morning to a small bloodstain on the pillow where her friend slept just the night before. This is the disturbing murder of Brianna Dennison, and on top of this being the reason why I lock my doors at night, her cousin also mysteriously disappeared almost 10 years to the day that this case took place. So let's talk about it. This is Brianna Dennison. She was 19 years old when she suddenly disappeared and was later found dead in 2008. Brianna was a student at Santa Barbara City College studying psychology, and her friends and family described her as a big goofball. She had a feisty sense of humor, was an extremely loyal friend, and her nickname was Breezy because to those who knew her, she felt like a breath of fresh air on a cool summer day. So in January of 2008, Brianna went back home to Reno, Nevada while on winter break. She she spent time hanging out with friends, family, and other college students from the University of Nevada campus. Brianna was last seen alive on January 20th, 2008. She had spent the evening attending a concert with friends and then went to a party at a casino in downtown Reno. She was having so much fun staying up late and eating junk food, all the things that 19-year-olds do. After the party, Brianna got a ride home with one of her friends who lived near the campus on McKay Court. Brianna had planned to stay the night at this friend's house, so when the two got back, her friend gave her a pillow and blanket and told her to snuggle up on the couch. The last time that Brianna was ever seen alive was at 4:30 that morning when her friend went down the hall and went to bed. What should have been just another normal sleepover quickly turned into something much more sinister. Because little did Brianna know, but there was a man that was roaming the neighborhood, breaking into several people's homes and attacking them. And sadly, she would be his next victim. So 9:30 the next morning rolls around, and Brianna's friend came out to the living room expecting to find Brianna there still sleeping, but she was nowhere to be found. All of her personal belongings were there, including her shoes, cell phone, and purse, but Brianna was missing. Then the friend spotted a small blood stain on the pillow that Brianna was using just the night before, and this is when she started to worry. It had recently just snowed, so it was pretty cold out, so there's no way that Brianna would have just left like that in a tank top and no shoes. So this is when her friend notified not only Brianna's parents, but also the local police to report her missing. When police arrived on scene, they immediately conducted a forensic investigation and found a few things that stood out. First, they found touch DNA that belonged to an unidentified male on the back door's doorknob, which was left unlocked. They also found the same unidentified man's DNA on the couch where Brianna slept that night. And most horrific of all is that this male's DNA was actually linked to, at the bare minimum, 2 other previous sexually motivated attacks in the same exact area. Literally in the 2 months before Brianna went missing, there were 2 other break-ins in the same neighborhood where women were viciously attacked and SA'd in their homes. Thankfully, they got away, and police were able to collect some DNA evidence in both cases, which, like I mentioned, then linked back to the current kidnapping of Brianna Dennison. What's even scarier is that that's not even all of the attacks. There were several others, including an attack on a woman in the parking garage of the University of Nevada Reno campus. This woman was held at gunpoint and then brutally SA'd. She escaped as well, but she never reported the crime. That is until after Brianna disappeared. So now back at the crime scene, authorities did confirm that the blood found on the pillowcase did belong to Brianna. This is when authorities knew that this wasn't just a case where someone left without saying anything. This was a kidnapping case, and from the looks of it, likely tied to the other break-ins and assaults in the area. And because of that, a massive search for Brianna was launched right away. When I say this was a big search, I mean it. Not only did the FBI join, but so did 1,700 volunteers. And this also included tracking dogs, by air, and even local waterways. Together, they scoured over 100 square miles searching for Brianna, but it was like she vanished into thin air. During this investigation, police discovered nearly 100 registered sex offenders who lived within just 1 mile of the McKay courthouse where Brianna vanished from. They were all interviewed, but this led police nowhere. This is when police sought information from all the previous victims in the area to see if they could provide a description of this unknown man, and thankfully they all remembered exactly what he looked like. But the terrifying part, each and every person described the exact same man down to a T. So now it went from possibly different break-ins to now one man and serial rapist, and with each crime he was quickly escalating. So from those descriptions, police were able to put together a composite sketch of the suspect and released it to the public in hopes of tracking this guy down and hopefully finding Brianna alive. But sadly, 2 weeks later, a gruesome discovery would be made. On February 15th, 2008, a local man named Albert had stopped for a lunch break at a Reno subway. As he was walking back to work, he had to pass through this really desolate field, and upon doing so, he saw a pile of tree branches that kind of stuck out to him. They seemed oddly placed, and sticking out of the tree branches was what appeared to be some orange fabric. When he got closer, he realized that what he was seeing was a pair of bright orange socks, and shockingly, they were attached to 2 human feet. At first glance, he thought that what he was seeing was just a mannequin, but sadly, this turned out to be Brianna, and she was clearly deceased. She was completely nude except for the bright orange socks that she was wearing, and she had a big gash on one of her arms. She was partially covered by the tree branches, a heavy rock, and some fresh snow. Albert didn't have a cell phone at the time, so he quickly went back to work, where he then called 911. When police arrived on scene, they confirmed that this was Brianna, and her cause of death was strangulation via a thin rope. She'd also been SA'd. The murder weapon was a pink thong, which was located underneath Brianna's right thigh. This pink underwear did not belong to Brianna, and on it, police found the killer's DNA as well as an unknown woman's DNA. DNA. Investigators believe that the killer left it next to her body to taunt them. It was thought that since they had so much DNA left behind at several different scenes that it would only be a matter of time before this guy was caught. But sadly, it took 10 entire months for him to be found. So in November of 2008, someone close to this man right here, 27-year-old James Byla, submitted a tip against him in relation to this case via a secret witness program. James had lived in Reno at the time of the attacks, was a former Marine, and was currently a construction worker. He had been dating a woman for a while, and together they had a 4-year-old son. And it was actually a friend of his girlfriend's that submitted the tip. The friend said that James' girlfriend had found a pair of women's underwear in his truck that were not hers as they were coming back from Washington. What was super sketchy is that not long after Brianna's abduction and murder, James abruptly quit his job, packed up everything he could in his truck with his girlfriend and son, and then moved to Washington. On his way there, he sold his truck and got a spur-of-the-moment job, and this stuck out as a red flag to his girlfriend's friend. Then news started to spread about all the local attacks in Reno and eventually Brianna's murder, as well as the composite sketch who just so happened to look exactly like James. Then it was all just too much to ignore, so she turned him in as a possible suspect. James was also arrested in 2001 after he threatened his girlfriend's neighbor with a knife, so he didn't have the best record, and those who knew him said he was really weird. So when police finally interviewed him 10 months after Brianna's murder, he denied ever knowing her or any of the other victims. He refused to give DNA, but this wasn't an issue because his girlfriend let police retrieve DNA from their 4-year-old son. That DNA test came back with a match, that his direct relative had left the DNA at all of the crime scenes. Then authorities were able to obtain a warrant to collect his DNA. And as I'm sure we can all guess, it came back as a match. James Byla was responsible for the assault, kidnapping, and murder of Brianna, as well as the many other assaults in the area. And the icing on the cake was when police tracked down his truck that he sold. The interior seats were gray fabric. And guess what was left behind on several of the victims? Gray fibers that matched his truck. So because of this, James was quickly arrested on charges of kidnapping, SA, and murder. And investigators made it clear that they were going for the harshest penalty possible, which was the death penalty. At the trial, his attorneys tried to get the death penalty thrown out, stating that he suffered an abusive childhood with an alcoholic father, and that before his crimes, he was a productive member of society. But thankfully, none of the jury members were having this, and he was ultimately sentenced to death. On top of this, the judge also sentenced him to an additional 4 life sentences for the other attacks that he committed. This case really affected the community and left a huge impact. I mean, all of the investigators who were assigned to this case were devastated. They referred to Brianna as everyone's daughter, so for this to be the outcome was just horrific. And after her body was found, the sales of handguns, tasers, and pepper spray increased dramatically at the University of Nevada, Reno. Like, this really scared everyone. And it's terrifying because James was a construction worker and he was really familiar with the university's campus because he had done several projects there. This let him easily target so many women. And it just makes me wonder if there are other people out there doing what he did, going undetected. It's likely that James had a lot more victims than what we are aware of. In 2013, Brianna's Law was signed into effect. This law mandates a DNA cheek swab whenever a person is booked for a felony arrest, and if the judge finds probable cause, that testing is entered into a national database. Brianna's mom really fought to have this law passed because it could have saved her daughter's life. Had James been forced to have his cheek swabbed in that early 2001 arrest, his DNA would have already been in the system. This means that he would have been caught right away when he committed those first assaults in the months before Brianna was abducted and killed. It could have saved her life. But as of today, Brianna's Law has already solved so many cold cases, including 9 murder cases, which is incredible. Her story has really sparked a lot of good change. It's just sad that it came at the cost of her life. In a strange turn of events, almost 10 years to the day that Brianna was killed, her cousin, Caitlin Dennison, would also go missing. She disappeared on January 10th, 2018, after traveling out of state with an unidentified man. The last time that she was ever heard from was when she called her family and told them that she was afraid for her life, and then she just vanished. She's not been seen or heard from since.
No, because I thought this was a horror story, but it turns out it's true. Ming Sen Shui was originally from Taiwan but moved to Minnesota when he was just 8, and the red flags were red flagging right from day dot. Ming lived with his mum, his dad, and his 2 siblings until his dad tragically passed away. And instead of being a nice older brother helping his siblings through this trauma, he actually decided to make their lives a living hell. He'd viciously beat them with a belt so violently that they were terrified to go even anywhere near him. And he just never grew out of this. He'd randomly just set fires in people's houses, throw rocks at people and vehicles just because. He was on an absolute rampage and it felt like nobody could control him. The police even ordered him to go to therapy when he was 14 because of his crazy behavior, but even the therapist was like, yeah, it kind of just feels like he's got no feelings. But he was certainly able to get romantic feelings for one of his teachers. When he was in 9th grade, he had this lovely teacher called Mary Stauffer, and he just became obsessed with her. It started as a little crush, and I feel like we can probably all relate to having a bit of a crush on one of our teachers when we were younger. This was not that. What he would imagine, the stories that he wrote about this teacher were just absolutely wild. He would fantasize about not only being intimate with her, but also it being non-consensual. And this obsession truly went on for years and years and years. So much so that even after he left school, he went to university, and then got to his early 20s, he was still thinking about and fantasizing about this particular teacher. And sickeningly, he decided he wanted to do something about his obsession. He started scouring local directories, you know, back when they had the directory books. I'm old enough to remember that. He was trying to find an address for Mary, until one day he hit the jackpot. He was like, oh my god, an address with that name. So he showed up to this house in the middle of the night, firearm in hand. And when he burst into the bedroom, Mary wasn't there. It was Mary's in-laws' house that he'd broken into. Now, he had no use for these in-laws, but he wanted to obviously scare them into not reporting this crime. So he tied them up on the ground and he said, don't you dare report this to the police, because I know where you live and I will come back and kill you. So, having no idea who the hell this psycho was, being absolutely terrified, they didn't report it. Ming's hunt for this teacher continued for 5 years. Meanwhile, she had a family of her own. She was blissfully unaware. She was actually living in the Philippines at that point, working as a Christian missionary with her husband and 2 kids. But they came back to Minnesota in 1979, unaware that this dangerous predator was lay in wait. In the middle of summer 1980, Ming's stalking in his head paid off. He tracked down his old school teacher to a beauty salon in Roseville where she was with her daughter, and he used the opportunity to pounce. He forced the pair into a car with a weapon and made Mary drive to a secluded location of Anaca County. He then tied them up with rope and stuffed them in the boot of the car. But as he carried on driving, he heard a noise from the boot of the car and he was like, oh, for God's sake, they're trying to escape. So he went into the boot of the car and tied them up even tighter. But then he heard a little voice. The voice said hi, and this is one of those moments where I just desperately wish I had a time machine. I could go back and I could scream, run as fast as you can. It was little 6-year-old Jason Wilkman. Ming grabbed the child, tied him up too, and threw him in the boot with the 2 girls. Bless Mary, she was terrified for her own life, but she actually used the opportunity to try and comfort the 2 children. And the next bit actually rips out my heart and stamps on it. But Jason was crying because he didn't want to miss going to his nan's house the next day. After a while, Ming stopped the car and got Jason out of the boot, and all Mary could see was that he had the little boy and he also had a large metal bar. He never brought Jason back to the car again, and Mary and the daughter heard the engine start up again. Now, time seemed to go on forever. It seemed like they'd been in that car for absolute days, when in reality it had just been an hour. Finally, when they were at their intended destination, Ming grabbed them and shoved them into a wardrobe, where they were held captive for 7 weeks. I can't imagine 7 hours in that situation. And it wasn't just the capture, it wasn't just being held in a wardrobe. He taped himself SA-ing Mary over and over and over. As if that wasn't bad enough, Mary and her daughter were absolutely sick with worry about what the hell he'd done to that little 6-year-old boy. Did he manage to get away? They just needed to know, so Mary asked Ming what he'd done. He claimed he set him free. He said, I threatened him and let him go, but could they really trust him? Mary started to doubt it when she saw some blood on some of Ming's clothes. And honestly, Mary knew that time was running out. The longer they stayed there, the longer the danger was to them. And on the 7th of July, when Ming was out at work, she managed to remove the hinge pins off the wardrobe door. It was their only chance of escape. They were finally out of the wardrobe and they needed to make a call to the police urgently before Ming came home. Thankfully, they managed to, and finally, after a trial in 1980, a jury found Ming guilty of kidnapping and given 30 years. But what about little Jason? It turns out the kidnapping psychopath wasn't a man of his word, and shock horror, he'd lied. He'd beaten Jason to death and discarded his body under some birch trees. But what happened at his trial honestly had my jaw hanging open. Mary bravely, bless her, after all of this trauma, testified against Ming in court. And while she was doing so, he jumped across the table with a blade and slashed her face. She had to be raced to hospital for 62 stitches. Absolutely wild. Was thankfully eventually found guilty and was given 40 years behind bars, on top of the original 30.
Sunday morning, February 1st of 2026, a church in Arizona is filling up with all of their regulars for their Sunday morning service. But one familiar face is missing, which is pretty strange because she never misses church. 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, a mom, a grandma, and a regular churchgoer, was nowhere to be seen. And for anyone and everyone who knows Nancy, her absence at church immediately meant that something was wrong. The people from the church were so concerned that even they reached out to Nancy's family members to let them know that she did not make it to church that morning because it was just that out of character. Because of that, at 11:56 in the morning that same day, family members arrived at Nancy Guthrie's house in the Catalina foothills, an area just north of Tucson. And this just happened, by the way. I'm sure every single one of you has seen it on the news, but what they found would trigger one of the most intensive missing people investigations Arizona has ever seen. Nancy was gone, and her personal belongings, including her phone and essential medications, were still inside the home. There were also red drops on her front porch. Her front door security camera was also missing. It looked like it was just completely removed from the property on purpose. And everything inside of that house would later be described by a sheriff as very concerning and inconsistent with a voluntary disappearance. For a woman with limited mobility who requires medication day to day to survive, this was way more than just unusual. This was terrifying. By 12:03 p.m., her family members had called 911, authorities were dispatched, and they arrived 10 minutes later at 12:13 p.m. And immediately, again, from the scene, it was just obvious that this wasn't just a missing persons case, it was an abduction. Whatever happened did not happen on Nancy's terms. The sheriff even stated from the beginning, "I believe that she has been abducted." And from that moment on, it was all hands on deck to try and figure out, where is Nancy Guthrie? Nancy Long Guthrie was born in January of 1942 in Fort Wright, Kentucky. She's been described as a woman defined by faith, resilience, and an unwavering devotion to her family. In the early 1970s, Nancy, along with her husband Charles Guthrie, made the decision to move to Arizona, where Nancy would spend more than 5 decades building a life and raising her 3 children: Charles, Cameron, Annie, and Savannah. At the time of her disappearance, again, very recent, she was very active in her community, a regular churchgoer, and someone who was very, very close to all of her children and her grandchildren. Nancy did live alone after her husband's passing, but she was far from isolated. She was always doing something, talking to someone. Her family checked in regularly on her. And even though she did face some health challenges living with a pacemaker and relying on daily medication for a chronic condition, according to family members, even at her age, 84 years old, she was still, quote, as sharp as tack with no cognitive impairments. So yeah, she does need daily medication in order to survive, which of course only adds a layer of danger to her disappearance. But the point I'm trying to make is that she was sharp, so it's not like she would have wandered off and gotten lost accidentally or anything like that. County sheriff would later emphasize this point, stating, quote, "Nancy Guthrie is of great sound mind. This is not a dementia-related case." Now let's talk about Nancy's youngest daughter, Savannah, and part of the reason as to why this case is so widespread. Savannah Guthrie is co-anchor and host of NBC's Today Show, and she is very well known. And Savannah, being as big of a public figure as she is only part of the reason as to why this case has been on every headline, apart from it obviously being a horrific story. And Savannah, along with her siblings, have spoken publicly about the situation, but we will get into that in a second. So Nancy is reported a missing person. Authorities from the jump stating that everything that they have so far is pointing to her being taken involuntarily. She didn't go on her own accord. One of the first things they do, of course, is start retracing Nancy's steps, beginning from the night
night before her disappearance, and slowly but surely, with the help of forensic evidence, security camera data, and medical device information, the county sheriff's department starts putting together a timeline. On Saturday, the night before, January 31st, Nancy calls an Uber to go to her daughter Annie's house for dinner. She got there, they ate, they had a lovely evening playing cards and hanging out, nothing out of the ordinary. Around 9:45 p.m., Nancy is taken home by her son-in-law and dropped off back at her house. Nancy's garage door was recorded opening at approximately 9:48 p.m. and closing presumably behind her at 9:50 p.m. Everything appeared to be normal. We can assume that Nancy started getting ready for bed, and back at their own home, Annie and her family had no reason to worry. At 1:47 a.m., Nancy Guthrie's doorbell camera disconnects, just completely stops working. Approximately at 2:17 p.m., about 30 minutes after the doorbell camera was disconnected, one of the security cameras detected movement. However, according to authorities, they were unable to retrieve the footage from this detection, so we don't know who it was or what it was. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker disconnects from its monitoring app, leaving them to assume that something happened around that time to Nancy that caused the pacemaker to disconnect. Between 2:28 a.m. and the sunrise, the timeline goes dark, and by Sunday morning, the people in her life realize that Nancy is missing. Nancy's house was closed off as a crime scene, and the red splatters on the front porch were tested and confirmed to be that of Nancy Guthrie's DNA. And keep in mind, the pressure on this investigation is strong because of the daily medicine that Nancy needs to be taking in order to survive. So on top of already wanting to move fast, the extra layer of not knowing what condition Nancy was in, or if she was even still alive, only makes it that much scarier and that much more tense. By day 3 of the investigation, multiple law enforcement agencies were coming together to work together on this case. The county sheriff's department, the FBI, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, search and rescue teams from multiple jurisdictions, K9 units, drone teams with thermal image capabilities, aerial resources, including helicopters. It really was a case of all hands on deck. Sorry, I keep saying was. It really is a case of all hands on deck. Authorities also began conducting interviewing the Uber driver who took Nancy to Annie's home on Saturday evening, family members including all 3 of Nancy's children, housekeeping staff who worked at Nancy's home, friends from her church, neighbors in and around her area. They continued on the forensic investigation, combing through her house to try and find any piece of evidence or DNA or anything that could point them in the right direction. They zeroed in on details, for example, the missing front door camera. Why would someone specifically remove that camera? Were they caught on video? Did they know that the camera was there before they arrived? How would they have known? How did they get in the house? The pacemaker data was also analyzed. The fact that it disconnected from its monitoring app at 2:28 a.m. was a crucial data point. But why? And what did it mean? Digital forensics teams analyzed Nancy's phone, her computer, her email accounts, her social media presence, looking for anything odd, unusual communications, or patterns that may help explain what happened to her. On Monday, February 3rd, Savannah Guthrie made the family's first public statement. Less than 48 hours after her mother was discovered missing, Savannah Guthrie shared a message on Instagram. It was brief, but it was heartfelt. It just said, "Please pray." Then she released a longer statement through NBC that reads, quote, "On behalf of our family, I want to thank everyone for the thoughts, prayers, and messages of support. Right now, our focus remains on the safe return of our dear mom. We thank law enforcement for their hard work on this case and encourage anyone with information to contact the County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. The first video appeal from Nancy's kids came on Wednesday, February 4th. Wednesday evening, Savannah posted nearly a 4-minute video to Instagram. She appeared in the middle, sitting down alongside her siblings, Annie and Cameron Guthrie. All 3 were visibly emotional but controlled. They were speaking directly to the camera and directly to whoever might have their mother. Savannah described her mother as, quote, "a kind, faithful, loyal, fiercely loving woman of goodness and light and God's precious daughter," end quote. And then she stated the direct appeal. Savannah addressed the reports of a ransom letter that had been sent to media outlets saying, quote, "As a family, we are doing everything we can. We are ready to talk. However, we live in a world where voices and images are easily manipulated. We need to know without a doubt that she is alive and that you have her. We want to hear from you and we are ready to listen. Please reach out to us." She was begging for proof of life, to know that their mom was and is still alive. On Thursday, February 5th, Day 5, the FBI announced a $50,000 reward for any information leading to the recovery of Nancy Guthrie and or the arrest or conviction of anyone involved in her disappearance. That same day, Nancy's son, Savannah's brother, also spoke out saying, quote, "This is Cameron Guthrie. I'm speaking for the Guthrie family. Whoever is out there holding our mother, we want to hear from you. We haven't heard anything directly. We need you to reach out and we need a way to communicate with you so we can move forward. But first, we need to know that you have our mom." The Guthrie family then released another video Saturday evening on February 7th, but this time the message was different. This time they claimed to have received some sort of communication. Savannah, next to her siblings, looking directly at the camera, said, quote, We received your message and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us so we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us and we will pay. We will pay. 3 simple words that confirmed what many people were suspecting. Ransom demands had been made and the family was willing to meet them. And again, back to the reports of the 3 big media outlets stating that they had also received ransom notes in regards to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. The details of these slowly started to be revealed, showing that there was some sort of demanding cryptocurrency and deadlines. CNN stated that a ransom note was sent to their station demanding money for Nancy's return. TMZ also received an alleged ransom note demanding a specific substantial amount of Bitcoin. But from what I could find on the internet, the latest deadline listed on the ransom note was Monday, February 9th at 5 p.m. From my understanding and what I found online, no money has been paid, and obviously we are now past that deadline. As of today, February 10th, there has been a major development. The FBI released surveillance images showing a potential subject. The 4 images show a person wearing gloves, a mask, and a backpack appearing to tamper with the camera at Nancy Guthrie's front door the morning of her disappearance, which is huge and terrifying. As far as how they got those images, because I was a little bit confused because I thought the camera wasn't working, blah, 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 it's been stated, quote, over the last 8 days, the FBI and the County Sheriff's Department have been working closely with our private sector partners to continue to recover any images or video footage from Nancy Guthrie's home that may have been lost, corrupted, or inaccessible due to a variety of factors, including the removal of the recording devices. The video was recovered from residual data located in back-end systems. Working with our partners, as of this morning, law enforcement has uncovered these previously inaccessible new images showing an individual appearing to have tampered with the camera at Nancy Guthrie's front door the morning of her disappearance. I just went on Savannah's Instagram. She has shared these photos online saying, quote, we believe that she is still alive. Bring her home. Anyone with information, please contact